that does cause loss of minority cultures. But what we do think is good is actively doing patronization of the arts. But this debate doesn't call for Prop to really talk about patronization of the arts. It's about language mandates, and language mandates are bad for preservation of minority culture. So we are against that.
We thank the moderators for their questions. We would now like to accept questions from the audience. All those who have questions, kindly raise your hands. I request the magazine committee members to thank you for that.
My question is for Ram. You said that language mandate in states would cut across barriers and will increase social contact because of having a common language in that state. So, and you also expressed as a part of your argument the apprehension of Hindi as a common language across India and the imposition of Hindi as a common language. So, let's say in North India, in place of the regional languages in Bihar, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, the official state language has been made Hindi in place of the regional languages that are spoken by a lot of people. But it may be argued that this is increasing social contact across those states, across the union in fact, by imposing Hindi, and that drives a sense of unity, which is something that you use to advocate for language mandate in separate states. So how do you harmonize the two aspects of your argument, that there should be language mandates in states and that language mandates help in increasing social contact?
I think firstly on the idea of states like MP, etc. having Hindi as an official language, I think the Constitution provides states enough autonomy at Article 351 to choose which language they believe best suits the state for the purpose of administration and for other purposes. So if these states have chosen to go ahead and opt in for Hindi as their official language, I think that's perfectly valid, considering the amount of people who speak Hindi in these states. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there were multiple regional languages which have been lost as a result of this Hindi imposition, as a result of multiple dialects being merged into one idea of Hindi that is now present across large parts of the country, right? I think secondly on how social contact actually increases as a part of these regional language mandates, right? I think if in the absence of these regional language mandates, let's think about what happens. You are not forced to learn Hindi, so you are not forced to learn Marathi in Maharashtra, so you never end up learning it. More importantly, the hierarchy that exists in like the terms of social importance of languages places Marathi quite low, which means that like a student from a Marathi medium school is viewed with less respect than you would view a student from an English medium school. We think this is absolutely wrong, and these language mandates try and equalize this. We think they bring regional languages to the same status as that of Hindi, which means that people from English medium schools now view these people as their equals. They go ahead and interact with them. This is what increases social contact. This is what brings groups together. It creates social cohesion. This is not to say that like only one language should be spoken across the state and other languages should be stamped out of existence. It is not like no one's going to come and shoot you in the head if you don't speak Marathi at home, right? I think this is completely personal. But I think that states have an incentive to go ahead and grant greater language, allow for greater language mandates because they increase social contact, because they foster assimilation, and it also assuages the fears of the local population, which means that if this fear and this source of anxiety does not exist, then that means that there is no sentiment that regional political parties that play on the sentiments of languages can go ahead and then manipulate into then allowing and encouraging attacks on migrant workers, etc. If this sentiment does not exist because you believe that your language is already protected enough by the state, that is where language mandates are effective in preventing harm to a lot of people and also and ultimately creating greater social contact. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
So my question is for Ram. So you said that forcing language mandates on migrant groups would lead to better assimilation. But have you ever thought of a situation where a person moves to a new state for a few years, say 2-3 years, then I choose to move to Karnataka? Would you force me to learn a new language every time I move to a new state, and how does that work for you? And additionally, I also have a question for Mallika. So you also talked about violence that happens because of mandating one language over the other. But this violence is mostly done by non-state actors. So how does imposing language mandates help or negatively impact the violence that takes place by non-state actors?
Thank you. So I think to answer the question, I think a lot of these interactions that you have, you learn the language organically to some extent at the very least, which means you'll probably learn to ask for a rickshaw in Kannada at some point in time. And I think if you don't, you probably should, because it makes your life easier. And I'm not sure why you would not want that. As I said in my speech, I think language does grant you certain benefits. It does make it a privilege to know a language. But I also think it's one of the easiest ways in which you can access greater privilege by simply learning another language, either organically or by state mandates in schools or in offices, etc. Right? I think even if you're there in a state for like even a couple of years, I think it does not harm you particularly to be more active in the state's culture. I think the state has a perfectly valid incentive to go ahead and protect that culture and encourage these language mandates. And if Isha would.
And just to add to that, there is no mandate on you as an individual coming into different states to learn the state's language. What it comes out of is as a respect to state. When you are interacting with government agencies, officials, of course, there is an expectation that the procedures would be carried out in the state language, which aids various individuals involved.
I'll answer the question that was posed to me. While we agree that majority of the violence is due to non-state actors, violence doesn't exist in an echo chamber. Oftentimes, how that violence starts is by allowing or sanctioning that violence, sanctioning the greater cause for that violence. So when the state says that you must learn X, Y, Z when you step into our territory, it then emboldens non-state actors. That can be an average citizen, or let's be honest, this is a reality. Most of them are probably also political actors. They're probably not the person in power, they're not the MP, but they are linked to their political party. So at the end of the day, when there is dog whistling, through your actions, one, like we've already put, right, you don't need protection. So then what is the point of you imposing this mandate? We are saying the point is malicious. The point is purely to dog whistle. Why? Because it's easier to get votes based on identity as opposed to making any real policy change. So at the end of the day, when that's the step that you're taking, you are culpable as the state for all the violence that comes out of non-state actors, and of course the political actors that might not be you but are linked to you in some way. We also want to answer the first question a little bit, which says that if it comes out of respect, like Isha said, you wouldn't need a mandate. So I don't think that makes sense.
I have a question for Ram again. So just to summarize what you said there exists a linguistic hierarchy with usually English at the top and Marathi way down the line. So when a child knows English as compared to another child who does not know English and only knows Marathi, the child who knows English would consider themselves better, would not give respect to the child who knows Marathi, as you said, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So why would mandating the child who knows English to learn Marathi necessarily lead to the same level of respect as would be compared to the child who knows Marathi learning English? You never explain that. You just say both of them know Marathi, this is the language mandate the state brings in. Both of them know Marathi now, so both of them are at an equal footing, there will be respect. But why is that exclusive? Whereas if I put a language mandate of English, both of them now know English, they are actually at an equal footing again. So you never explain why a language mandate of a regional language is more important as compared to that of English. Because English, if mandated, is not only putting them at an equal footing in the present, where both of them can speak English now as children, but also down the future it will help widen their horizons not only nationally, internationally as well. So this is a point of clarification that I would like.
That's perfectly fair. I think across the three language formula, if you see, English does have a very prevalent presence among us in education across all levels, right? I think English necessarily is taught in most schools, most government schools, etc. at some stage or the other. I think the reason why the second language becomes important is because that is one over which the state has some amount of control, and that is what state's role becomes to determine these languages, right? I think the reason states have an incentive to protect these languages is because of what we talked about earlier. Is the states have a particular cultural ethos that they want protected, which is done through these languages. I think English already enjoys a significant advantage across the board. I don't think it needs special protection at any stage whatsoever. Most of your official communication by the state, etc., comes along with the English translation. I'm not saying that state students shouldn't learn English, but the ways in which you learn English are also crucial, right? If you're coming from a Marathi medium background, you know English, and the person who's studying in the English medium school also knows English, but you're still looked down upon because your primary language of speaking to other people, your medium of communication is probably not English, right? It's probably Marathi, and maybe your English is not as fluent as another person's. I think the hierarchy is very social, which means it's also, which means that a lot of it is not something that you can very concretely lay down, which is why you have the need for a regional language in this space.
Unfortunately, I don't have a question for the opposition. So back to the proposition, a quick distinction in my question. Let's distinguish language imposition in schools and education as opposed to in public discourse. Now coming to that, if every individual in this auditorium was compelled by force of law to speak in Marathi, I as a Malayali can only speak in Malayalam in the confines of closed spaces within my house, because all public discourse would necessarily have to happen in Marathi. Now, when the Constitution under 19.1 and 19.1 gives me the right to travel around the country, reside somewhere, necessarily, that also gives me the right to speak in my language. Why does that have to be confined to only indoor spaces, to only my house, to only private events? Why can't I speak in Malayalam outside? That's the small question that I have.
Language mandates in no way are stopping individuals from speaking the language they want to speak in public spaces. What it is mandating is certain languages be given preference in government agencies, in official duties, and say education. What it is doing is preserving the cultures of the people who are already present in the state, the people who come in from regional areas where the other languages are not as spoken of. In no way are you being stopped from speaking the language that you wish to in a public space. Ram would also like to add.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with Isha. I think you are perfectly free to speak in Malayalam to other people who also know Malayalam. I don't think there's any restriction by the state at any point on that. The only place the state comes in is where it tells you what medium your education is going to be in, or one more language that you're going to study in school is. I don't think that extends to blanket bans on speaking another language in a public forum. I think that would be unconstitutional. I don't think states would actually go ahead and do that. I think this characterization is quite unfair. It's a bit of a straw man.
नमस्कार. मी मराठी आहे आणि मराठीमध्ये प्रश्न विचार आणि तुम्ही म्हणजे जो सर्व भारतीय भाषांविषयी हे केला, परंतु इंग्लिशमध्ये केला. हे असं झालंय म्हणजे तुम्ही भारतीय भाषेला प्रोटेक्ट करायचं हे करता आणि तुम्ही ते पूर्णपणे इंग्रजीमध्ये करता. पहिल्यांदा हे म्हणजे तुमचा दुपट्टी म्हणजे दुतोंडीपणा आहे असं म्हणलं. आणि इंग्लिश क्वेश्चन तर आहेच. आणि आजच्या युगामध्ये जसे म्हणजे जिथं AI आलेलं आहे तिथं वेगवेगळ्या भाषा शिकायची काय गरज आहे. एकच भाषा तो जो शिकता आहे आणि स्टेटने वेगवेगळ्या आहे जो म्हणजे माझं असं म्हणणं आहे एकच भाषा शिकली तर म्हणजे तो लवकर शिकेल, तो ज्ञानी होणं महत्वाचं आहे. तो हिंदी बोलेल, इंग्रजी आणि इंग्लिश फक्त स्पीकर तयार केलेले आहे आणि थिंकिंग थिंकिंग म्हणजे त्या भावना हे व्यक्त करून तो त्याच्या भाषेमधून तो चांगल्या प्रकारे व्यक्त करू शकतो. आता उदाहरणार्थ आणि माझी भाषा वेगळी म्हणजे पुणेरी मराठी वेगळी असते. आता मी लातूरची, आमची मराठी वेगळी आहे. म्हणजे असंही होतं की पुणेरी मराठी आमच्यावर थोपली जाते, असंही होतंय. आमचं असं म्हणणं आहे की बाबा एज्युकेशन म्हणजे शिक्षण जे आहे तर त्याच भाषेमध्ये जी तिथली लोकल भाषा आहे त्याच भाषेमध्ये तर चांगलं होईल, याच्यावर तुमचं काम आहे. त्याऐवजी तुम्ही दुसऱ्या तिसऱ्या इंग्रजी भाषेमध्ये आणि ज्यांना बाबा इंग्रजी शिकायचं आहे त्यांना विदेशात जायचं आहे ते शिकतील. देशाने त्याच्यावर कशाला पैसे खर्च करावा असं तुम्हाला वाटतं का? आणि ज्यांना हिंदी शिकायचं आहे ज्यांना वर जायचं त्यांनी शिका. असं आमचं म्हणणं आहे की लोकशाही आहे. लोकशाहीमध्ये इथल्या व्यक्तींनी जो पैसा तयार केला आहे, जो दिलेला आहे, त्याच्यामध्ये इथल्या पैशावर इथल्या माणसाचं कल्चर प्रिझर्व केलं पाहिजे असं आम्हाला वाटतं. तर तुम्हाला काय वाटतं?
मी घेऊ शकते क्वेश्चन?
हा, घेऊ शकता तुम्ही.
चालेल. मी मराठीमध्ये पण बोलणार, मी आय ऑल्सो स्पीक इंग्लिश. हे आहे की आमचं म्हणणं हे नाहीये की मराठी नाही शिकायला पाहिजे. हे मान्य आहे की तुमचंच म्हणणं आहे की पुणेरीमध्ये वेगळं मराठी आहे, मुंबईमध्ये वेगळं मराठी आहे, धुळेमध्ये तर मराठी आहेच नाही, खानदेशी बोलतात, बरोबर? So in this world, when a singular state has multiple dialects but also multiple languages, तुम्ही असं म्हणतात की मी आता मुंबईमध्ये जॉब करते, मी लॉयर आहे, मी मुंबईमध्ये जॉब करते, उद्या मला केस मिळालं, मी धुळे गेले, इफ आय गो टू धुळे, हाऊ इज इट पॉसिबल? असं कसं शक्य असू शकतं की मी ते भाषा शिकू शकते? मला मान्य आहे तुमचं म्हणणं. मी सांगते की तुमच्या घरात तुम्ही मराठी बोला, तुम्ही सेलिब्रेट करा, सगळं फेस्टिवल इकडे करा. मी तर मराठी आहे, मला बोलायला पण येतं. दॅट्स नॉट अ क्वेश्चन दॅट शुड बी इन द ॲम्बिट ऑफ दिस डिबेट. बट द पॉइंट इज, एक स्कूलमध्ये मल्टिपल भाषा शिकवतात, इंग्लिश, हिंदी, मराठी सगळं शिकवतात, अँड दॅट इज अ गुड थिंग. ॲट द एंड ऑफ द डे मी कुठेही जाऊ शकते हे देशात, राईट? आणि मी हे पण सांगते की जेव्हा मॅन्डेट नाही, when there is no mandate, when the state doesn't tell you that you should teach a certain language, I also want to clarify that language mandates don't just extend to government notices, they extend to saying that a private organization should also have boards in a certain language. In Karnataka, recently what they've said is that there should be a board that says how many Kannada speakers are there, and if they are not Kannada speakers, you teach them Kannada. So that we are against. Why? Because one, within an office setting you can speak in English, right? Because you are not just working within Karnataka, you are working globally most likely. We think that that is important to acknowledge, and let's all speak in English when we are in a public setup, because our work extends beyond local lines. आमचं काम, आज मी हायकोर्टमध्ये फाईल करते, उद्या ते सुप्रीम कोर्टमध्ये जाणार, तेव्हा काय करणार आम्ही? वी हॅव टू अंडरस्टँड दॅट इंग्लिश शिकणं, लर्निंग इंग्लिश is not antithetical to speaking in Marathi. That is what we are saying. We are saying Marathi or any language of states or local communities. I'm saying even within Marathi there is Khandeshi, right? So when you go to that district, they will celebrate in their own way, they will speak in their own way, they will create culture in their own way, but that is not the state's mandate to tell you what you should speak. You will learn automatically because you're going there, and then I have to file an application before the district court here. I also as a lawyer want to function here. I will learn enough that I can speak to that JC, or I will ensure that I will learn enough that my work can get done. There is nothing wrong with that. Nobody is saying your language is less or my language is better. The only idea is we are very multicultural, आणि सर्व भाषांना we have to learn how to coexist with each other. आणि ते तेव्हाच होऊ शकतं जेव्हा आपल्या स्कूल्समध्ये इंग्लिश प्रायमसी असेल, बिकॉज वी आर गोइंग इन टू अन इकॉनॉमिक वर्ल्ड, आणि तुम्ही हिंदी, मराठी जे काही शिकायचं आहे लोकल लेवलमध्ये, मी सांगते महाराष्ट्रामध्ये देर कॅन बी अदर जिल्हाज विच दे कॅन लर्न खानदेशी, अँड दॅट्स परफेक्टली फाईन विथ अस. वी आर सेइंग डोंट पुश मराठी डाऊन द थ्रोट. वी आर सेइंग दॅट्स ऑल. देर इज नो आयडिया दॅट यू विल नॉट लर्न मराठी. मॅन्डेटमध्ये असं होतं की यू फोर्स अ पर्सन टू स्पीक अ सर्टन लँग्वेज विच वी आर नॉट ओके विथ. They will learn enough, and you also make an attempt to learn English and Hindi, and we will all coexist with each other, which I think is the ideal setup for not only a union of states but a globalized world.
It's not, but opposition, when you go ahead and escape this dichotomy created by government completely, am I audible? So my question is to the opposition: when you go ahead and escape this dichotomy created by government completely and suggest English as a linking tool, on the scale of magnitude, won't it be alienating the larger chunk of people, given that the English is still matter of privilege and only the privileged strata of society can access and communicate into that? So won't the alienation symmetric in both the paradigms? That's my question.
So English alienating a major part of the country. So that is the question basically, and the point we are trying to make is that English is something that has found common ground for decades and is acceptable to most of the states, if not all, as a common link between all of them, and provides a means for states to communicate amongst themselves, people to communicate amongst themselves. The second point that is quite our lived reality is that English has become an important language for employability. With a globalized world, with our growing young population, with a growing tertiary sector which calls for proficiency in English, be it coding or be it a call center job, where it is essential for a youth to be proficient in English to get a job, it is essential that English is taught nationwide, not only as a link language but also equip the youth with an economic tool to get jobs.
Am I audible? Yeah. Jai Hind, good evening. My question is, sir, the reasoning you gave behind mandating state level or regional languages is that they would be protected. But mandating Kannada is detrimental to Tulu, which is spoken by more than 20% of the Kannadigas. Mandating Marathi is detrimental to Konkani. So how is mandating languages at a state level justified, but how is mandating Hindi at a union level not justified? Why the angst against Hindi?
Thank you. Alright, I think the point at which we have these regional language mandates, it doesn't necessarily exclude these other people from speaking these languages at all. I think people who speak Tulu continue to speak Tulu, people who speak Konkani, I am personally one of them, we continue to speak Konkani in a multiplicity of social interactions that we have, right? I think the only thing that changes is that considering the fact that a majority of the state speaks Marathi, a majority of the administrative work of the state is carried out in Marathi, people at banks are more likely to know Marathi, people at the BMC ward office where I have to go to get a birth certificate, a death certificate are more likely to know Marathi. We think it is beneficial for people to know at least the basics of the language in all these interactions, and this is what helps people as well. We don't think this is necessarily harmful to people to learn another language. I think this skill being taught at school level and like being encouraged across various walks of life is in fact very helpful to multiple people across the country, right? I also think regional languages gain a lot more respect the point at which you have language mandates, right? The point at which you tell people that your languages, the ones that you speak at home, are not supposed to be talked about only in your home. They're supposed to be taught in schools. They're supposed to be accorded the same level of respect. I am not opposed to Tulu medium schools opening in the areas of Karnataka where Tulu is a majority of groups speak Tulu. I am not opposed to Konkani medium schools opening up. But I think the only way regional languages get the sort of respect that they deserve is by these mandates. The only reason I know Marathi enough to converse with people in the office is because I was taught Marathi in school. I have no other incentive to go ahead and learn it at great difficulty outside of, like, say, when I'm beyond a certain age. So I think it's more, it's fairly more accessible for people to then go ahead and learn the language at a local stage. It's much more useful to get things done in the state. I think opposition tries to make the case that all people go outside of the world, you learn English, etc. I think it's totally fair. We're okay with English being a linked language. But keep in mind, almost like 10 to 20% of India lives below the poverty line. A lot more people probably don't have access to education, etc. Right? I don't think people's main concern at that point is how well they're going to assimilate into the global world. Globalization is probably not their biggest concern. The fact that they are able to get educated in their mother tongue is of more concern, right? I think there are multiple studies that have shown that when a person is able to learn in their mother tongue, they're able to have better educational outcomes. This regional language mandates are how we fix educational disparity between a lot of groups, how we bring them to the same level of equality that you actually wish to have, right? I think that's why we would prefer to have these regional language mandates.
Last question for this evening.
Well, my question is for the opposition. Am I audible? Yeah. Yes. It's not functioning.
Hello. My question is for the opposition. The opposition member, while the learned advocate asked you whether culture is a part of your private life or a public life, what you had said that it is a part of your private life. And I do believe that culture is a way of life and language is the most important and major subset of that culture. So you're asserting that culture is a private part, lies in the private arena, but I don't think so, because your festivals, the values which you share, and the most important thing is there are safeguards in the constitution for tribal societies, their culture. So if culture was a private part, would there be safeguards in the constitution for the community as a whole? This is my first question. And my second question is that I truly belong that language mandates are aimed at preserving the culture. I am not saying that when you are in a public space, you should be forced to speak Malayali or Marathi. What I am saying that under these forces of globalization, with ABCD, there comes Shakespeare, Plato, and all the cultural etiquettes of the West. So, what if the values overpower your traditional values and they lead to the erosion of your fundamental cultural values? So, language mandates in educational field is very necessary. And what Mallika Dandekar said, that we are saying that English is the primary language, it should be given primacy. But when you make English primary language, even in the school, but while during employment opportunities, only English is preferred. The Marathi or other language is not preferred. So indirectly, there is a setback for other language. What is your view on that?
The debate has moved against imposition of English. There is no imposition of English anywhere. We are discussing imposition of a local language. English is not being imposed. There seems to be some resentment that why is English so widely used? It's because it is the language of commerce, maybe it is a common language, but there is no imposition of English.
So to deal with the first part of your question as to whether culture is private, and if it's private, then how is culture being expressed in festivals on the streets? When we say that culture is private, it does not mean that a person expresses their culture by themselves. Communities are private form of expressing culture. Communities are in groups within a larger society. The communities are the private spaces where culture is expressed. And therefore, when you say that someone else, someone belonging to some other culture must speak in a language, that is when you are exceeding your private space, you are exceeding your native set of people who speak a language and forcing someone who is alien to your community, who belongs to the general public, forcing them to speak your language. That is something we are not okay with. We are okay with culture being expressed within communities. They are private spaces, and therefore this distinction must come out. Secondly, on English as a whole, as Sir rightly said, that English is not being imposed. Since it is a language of commerce, it is being taught in school. It is the state's mandate to give free and compulsory education to children. They are being made literate in English in schools with the new education, the national education policy, where English is being taught in schools. And therefore, this is merely a means of equipping people with the capability of getting a job. Now, when you say that, if English comes or some other language comes or some other script comes, you forget your culture. I would like to just point out a very factual thing. But the fact that Marathi is not written in the script it was used to be written. It is written in the Devanagari script. Marathi was used to be written in the Modi script. That was given up in 1950 and they changed the script. That does not mean that Marathi culture is lost. Just by changing the script in which you write a language, just by speaking another language, according to us, you are not losing your culture. You continue to speak your native language at your home. You continue to listen to music in your native language because you like to listen to it. While you also learn a language that helps you get employment, that helps you converse with someone from other state, that helps you converse with someone from a completely different region.
I'll just clarify with one sentence. Private doesn't mean close your door and speak inside the walls of your home. Private means non-state. So private means community is independent of state. We are saying that the state is not the karta of culture. The state can only do minimal things to protect it, but the idea is that all of us are not only in a common culture, but we are all carrying our own culture. Like for example, my mom is Tamilian, my dad is Maharashtrian. I carry this composite culture as opposed to just because I'm in Maharashtra, my culture is Marathi. That's the distinction we make. Private means individual, not state.
We would like to thank the audience and the speakers for that fruitful question and answer session. To conclude the evening, we would like to open the floor for closing remarks. And for that, I would like to now welcome Ms. Isha Sheth from the side proposition.
Thank you. Addressing some questions that have been raised during the course of the arguments. Does Marathi really help Maharashtra, or does Kannada really help Kannada? When what you and I probably learned in schools, does mandating it in schools really help us the day here we are? Now, the arguments that have been put forward today come from a perspective of us living our lives in cities. Of course, over here we have English, we have other languages, which we are as used to as speaking Marathi or other regional languages. But when you look at the perspective of a regional area, if you were to go into a small village in Maharashtra, you would probably not even hear a person speak any language other than Marathi, despite the efforts from states to put other languages, to have a mandate of 3-language policy into these states. What the state is trying to do is put forward a mandate at the state level, at a level that any person who is coming into a different part of the state should not be lost. Should not be lost because there are so many different people here who are not able to understand any language other than Marathi. Now, imposing on private players the obligation to put up boards in Marathi, the obligation to speak, maybe not an obligation from the state, but maybe an unsaid obligation from the community around us to speak a certain language at certain places, comes from this exact fear of alienation. Alienation because they are not aware of other languages, they are not aware of other means of communicating. Their very means of livelihood are threatened because we have moved so far ahead. Moving on to the next point, that is employability. We say that English has helped us to a great extent to become more employable. English, obviously recruiters would look for an English-speaking proficiency. That is why when states mandate that there are certain players in the state where a regional language is mandated, they ensure that no person is stopped from moving into different parts of the state because of any restrictions on languages. As a person who moves from one state to another, you and I can be proficient in English, you and I can very well converse in that language and settle into it. But why should this right of movement from one part of the country to the other be restricted just to privileged individuals present in the room today? Why should the state not get an option? Why should the state be prohibited from putting a language forward that can also help those individuals who are probably not present in this room today as well? That is what is helping bringing culture from one part of the state into another. And of course, there is no restriction on the state interacting with other states in other languages. What is propagated here is that within a state, you mandate one language that helps the people within the state talk with each other, and you also propagate the other regional languages so that there is no extinction of those languages. Do not impose a language which is alien to these people. Do not impose a language that these people do not want to speak in. The states should have the power to select the languages that can be imposed. Say, for example, in the state of Maharashtra, Marathi, there might be other languages, other regional dialects of the language, which other mother tongues within the state, which can help children, which can help people living within regional areas understand, grow, and Marathi as a means of communication throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Isha. I would now like to invite Mr. Luy for closing remarks from the side opposition.
So while we are at the fag end of this debate, I would like to leave you with a thought. Why do people migrate? Why do people go to another state? It may be for getting better education, better healthcare, maybe job prospects. The intention of a migrant is not to harm the culture of the home state. It can never be. And therefore, taking staunch measures such as language mandates and forcing a migrant to speak in the state language is incorrect. It is also important to understand the state's constitutional right to have an official language does not extend to having language mandates. An official language cannot be equated with forcing someone to speak in a language otherwise. Secondly, it is important to understand that it is paradoxical to state that while we are continuing to impose one language throughout the state, regional languages, endangered languages, or languages of the minority will continue to grow. This is antithetical to the idea of the state's reorganization. It is antithetical and against the idea of having movement within the country, of not having a static demographic within the country, and it is against the fear of having unilingual states. Now, the side opposition has consistently proven to you that it is important to allow cultures to take their natural course, to grow, to adapt, and to adapt with changing times, technology, and social structure. The opposition's word ensures that the fundamental rights of its citizens, that is, right to their culture, right to leading a life with dignity, right to residing and settling in any part of a country, is much better in our realm. Culture is transmitted at homes, within communities. It is not for the state to push or demote a culture. I would like to reinforce the idea that it is the state's duty to maintain the heritage and the composite culture of our country, which is not happening through language mandates. Lastly, I would like to bring this idea of technology which has been proposed by opposition, that there is no need to learn another language, although it is a reality that people may learn another language for functional purposes. There is no need to force people to learn language in the strict sense in the age of technology and advancement. Lastly, I would like to say that the proposition's word damages the idea of India and damages the unity and integrity of India as envisaged in the constitution, and it is antithetical and against the unity and integrity of this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Luy. To conclude the closing remarks from the side proposition, I would now like to invite Mr. Ram Gupta.
You need to save culture before it's too late. Side opposition argues that because of technology, because of multiple reasons, you don't need to learn languages. These very sentiments are what causes the loss of languages. Look, languages don't die organically. This happens they don't die without any agency, without any intentionality. It's not a natural process. Speakers don't shift voluntarily immediately, right? There is a unequal power relation between various languages and various people, speakers of those languages. Language shift and the loss of linguistic diversity are enforced as a set of interrelated agencies. Linguistic communities in multiple states of India feel a need to preserve their languages. The states have an incentive to back them. I think the hierarchy between languages that we speak of at multiple points is extremely important to understand because it is not harmless. the sense of shame that people feel leads them to believe that the things that they learn at home are not as important as the things that they learn in school. The kind of mismatch between languages at home and at school is what causes a lot of loss of understanding and a lot of education outcomes in multiple groups. It may not be as easy for all groups of people to learn English, but it definitely is easier for a lot of people to learn concepts of science, astronomy, physics, etc. in their own regional languages. The point at which you know these things, I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn English. I think it's clear across the board that English is a necessary medium. But I think learning regional languages provides some unique advantages that the state also benefits from. The state benefits from the social cohesion that these language mandates bring about. People are more likely to then speak in these languages, and this means that the people who in other circumstances would have gone out and attacked these people are now more likely to view these people as friends and to view these people as part of the in-group that they have. Hence, this social cohesion, the social unity that this fosters, the cooperation between groups that this fosters, the larger creation of an in-group that this fosters is what is beneficial to the idea of India. People maintain their own individual cultures, people maintain their own individual languages, but they also learn to adopt a greater idea of the state that they belong to, the state that they are presently living in. They're more likely to adopt these languages as well. Coming back to my point that I made in my speech on accessibility in governance, I think people from marginalized backgrounds are much better off when they're able to access governance structures in the languages that they know. This means that notices for schemes, notices for availing of certain benefits of certain schemes are made available to people in languages they understand best. Advertisements for these schemes are made in languages that people understand best. All of this means that people find governance more accessible when it happens in a language that they particularly understand. English or Hindi probably make it more difficult, which is why states, governments particularly act as unique actors. In the case of France, if regional governments were probably allowed to protect the languages that are now extinct, we may have had a different linguistic structure there in place, which in India, I think we are at a point of time where we have an opportunity for states to protect the culture, to protect their languages, to protect their cultures against an overwhelming tide of globalization, coupled with the tide of Hindi imposition that the center has been pushing since a long time. I think both of these necessitate the protection of culture. You don't protect culture just because it's about to die. I'm not saying you're against the protection of vulnerable cultures as opposition posits. We are perfectly okay with these vulnerable cultures being protected as well, but that can't come at the cost of ignoring the central cultures of states and protecting the languages of states. I think these languages, more than just preservation of culture, delve into a matter of necessity at a certain stage. They delve into a matter of greater accessibility in governance. They mean that a lot of people now see themselves as represented on the stage at governments and are much better off in these situations. I think the sense of belonging that this fosters, that means a migrant from Gujarat, when he learns to speak Marathi, probably feels more integrated into society. I think the sense of catharsis is extremely important. The sense of belonging that people develop by learning a language, by being part of a culture that was probably not their own, is extremely cathartic. It's extremely influential. I think for all these reasons, we're very proud to propose and argue that language mandates are ultimately for the benefit of India, for the benefit of social cohesion, and these mandates are what for preservation of culture are extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. We would now like to invite Ms. Mallika Dandekar for closing remarks from the side opposition.
The opposition lies to you. They say that a rickshaw driver in Karnataka will suddenly be happy the minute mandates are imposed because they believe every migrant is now speaking Kannada perfectly. Think about it. Do you think once the mandate is imposed, people just start magically speaking Kannada perfectly? No. They only tell you that the mandates will be imposed. They never tell you how people actually end up learning it. What do mandates actually do? They only tell the people that they must learn, but at the end of the day, the rickshaw driver in Karnataka still wants you to speak Kannada to his proficiency level. He does not start acknowledging that you are trying to speak some degree of Kannada. Here is what we think actually happens. We think that fear doesn't get assuaged, it gets replaced with pride. it gets replaced with the idea that if you're coming to our state, you need to be speaking this perfect level of our language. It's evidenced by the fact that someone asked us a question as to why this debate was not happening in Marathi, right? The idea is that things can exist in other languages, but people start thinking that it must exist only in the state language, which we are not okay with. But let's start thinking about what their model is, right? We think that this is not just about education. They never tell you about how education will suddenly mean that people have proficiency, which I've already pointed out. But Ram says he could learn Marathi because he was taught it in school. There are immigrants who come to the Bombay High Court to work, right? What about them? How do they learn in their paradigm? But we tell you there's an alternative. We tell you that you have Duolingo, you have Bhashini, you have vocational tutorials today that teach you how to speak the state or local language. Why is it better? Because there is no one pushing it down your throat. And what happens because of that? It means that you don't feel alienated that you have to learn it, but also the majority does not feel a sense of pride that if you don't speak it a certain way or you're not assimilating to this degree, you are not allowed to enter our space. That is what we are against. They have not once gone against and proved why it's okay for people to be verbally abused, physically abused because mandates exist. And it is their burden to prove that. Don't let them lie to you. Learning in a mother tongue is good, we agree. But we think it happens from ages 1 to 5 in your home. Why do we think it's best placed in your home? Because we are all polyglots in this state, and it's most likely that just because you're in Mumbai, your mother tongue is not Marathi. You're not going to go to school and learn your mother tongue. You're going to learn a mother tongue which is not your own. Hence, we think that multitudes of mother tongues means that you're best placed to learn it from your mother and your father, who will teach you with cultural context. And that's what culture is. It comes with context. It comes with the idea that this is what your ajji or your grandmother liked, this is what your mother, this is the language that your mother speaks, and that's why it's important to you. We are okay with mother tongues not being taught in schools. And the reason is that schools primarily equip you for economic integration. And we are okay with it primarily being in English. We are completely okay with that. Yes, you can teach to other languages as the NEP proposes, but it's up to the local communities to decide what that means. It means a minority institution can teach Gujarati even in Maharashtra. It means that in Khandesh district in Maharashtra, you teach Khandeshi and not Marathi. That is perfectly okay. But here, cohesion starts at the level of the state. They say migrants will just magically learn or be pushed to learn. We think that once the state dog whistles that you have to learn something, cohesion falls apart. You don't accept people at the level that they're at and meet them at the level that they're at, and you also try to translate what you're saying, right? And it's perfectly fine. We will bite the bullet and say that as a Maharashtrian, I will speak in broken Marathi, broken Hindi, broken English to someone who can't speak Marathi, and we think that's a function of cohesion in the union of states because they have come to Mumbai with an honest heart to earn a living. They probably don't have the time to learn at my proficiency, and that's okay. Why we think that different permutations and languages can exist within state? Because there are smaller languages that will die out. The best way they can be preserved is one, that the state allows for people to spend more time at home, which we've already told you. Policies that allow for better leave, policies that allow for better maternal, paternal policies, policies that allow for patronage of the arts, right? What does that mean? That means that funding museums, funding music, making tax-free the movies that are produced in different local languages by the center and the state. It means that you start consuming this media more. Think about what you remember better. A Marathi song that you listen to if you're Maharashtrian, or the Barakhadi that you learned in school. Barakhadi is still a bad example, but like whatever you learned in 10th standard, right? Probably it's the music, plays, the movies that stay with you for longer. We have a model in which we preserve culture without pushing it down your throat. But here's the thing, right? In props world, they don't tell you how like a Khandeshi or a Konkani or a Tulu will not die out in these states, which we tell you that local communities can have their own schools, can have their own notices. We don't think it's a state's mandate. There are states within states, sub-regions within sub-regions. India is too complex to make this so simple. But acceptance dies the minute you impose mandate as a dog whistle. We think that they also say some things that are not particularly important. Notices are already published in all official languages. This debate is not about that. This debate is about pushing it to educational institutions and making sure that every private office mandates that you learn the state language. That's what they have to defend, and they don't do that. Certain languages can evolve, and we are okay with that. We are okay with French, like some old form of French dying. We are okay with Prakrit dying to give room to Hindi. They evolve, right? But what we're not okay with is pride engulfing these small communities whole. Pride engulfing you whole when you enter Mumbai and you can't speak a certain language. We are not okay with the violence that you will face. Thank you.
Thank all the speakers for their wonderful speeches. What has been a brilliant debate must now come to an end.
It is now time for the most exciting part of this debate, the final vote of the House. So everyone who is in support of side proposition consisting of Isha and Ram who have argued in favour of language mandates, please raise your blue chips. I request the magazine committee members to kindly collect the chits. And also, please submit the other chit as well so that there is no confusion as to double vote counting.
रेड चिट को उन्हें काउंट करना है। हाँ एक्चुअली अरे उन्हें काउंट करना है। यू आर कनेक्टिंग बोथ चिट्स विल टेक दिस want to raise the rate. No, I am not voting for it.
They asked you to discard view, na?
Yeah.
Whoever is not discarded.
इसका रेट शीट तो दे दो आपने आपने रेट भी दी अच्छा
To avoid confusion and double check the election.
Alright, all those who support opposition consisting of Mallika and Luy who have argued against the language mandates, please raise your red chits. I request the magazine committee members to collect the chits.
They are gonna count the votes. You're from Trivani, right? 2 hours. That is Dharmashri, Professor Dharmashri Bhagat lecture. Dharmashri Bhagat, the one who teaches legal language. Just check. There is concept of justice, equity, equality.
We thank the audience for casting their vote. While we count the chits, we request our esteemed moderators to kindly deliver their own remarks and their own views about this topic. Guys, I request everyone to kindly be seated. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much to the magazine committee for having given us this opportunity of coming and moderating this extremely enlightening and important debate. The issue is very important. The issue is reconcile two very conflicting points of view and at the same time do it by a civilized discourse and not beating up people, because that's the whole idea behind this, is that you try and resolve these issues or agree at least that they can't be resolved, but you do it in a civil manner. And I thank all the participants for putting their points of view across so lucidly. My own point of view now. As far as the topic of today was concerned, it was language mandate to preserve culture. Now, the first thing that we need to really be cognizant of is the word mandate means compulsion. It's not a choice. If I am caught by a Havaldar and I tell him, Sahib, chuk sali maaf kara, he will say, Are Marathi Manu said, you go. That's not a mandate. That's an advantage that I get by reason of him thinking, oh, he's a fellow Maharashtrian, let him go. If he's in the mood to let anybody go, he'll let being resentful as far as somebody who's a non-Kannadiga is concerned, is because it is inherently linked to some sense of economic angst. Why does that rickshawala in Bangalore say, if you do not speak Kannada, I am not going to take you? He is not interested in your having a working knowledge language of Kannada. He wants you to be a Kannadiga, then he will take you. Why does he identify this into Kannadiga and non-Kannadiga? Because he is increasingly getting a feeling that Kannadigas are losing jobs to non-Kannadigas. You have all these centers which are coming up, you have all these tech cities which are coming up. Tech is language, religion, culture agnostic. He feels that his people are losing out. That is why you have Maharashtrians who are beating up people from UP. Why? They feel they are losing out. They are losing jobs. They are losing opportunities. Now this is the fundamental thing which your political class exploits. Because here you only have Maharashtrian votes. An immigrant who comes doesn't count for a vote. You inflame passions here. You get people riled up on the ground of language. You have an emotive issue. You have a political issue. It then converts into votes. I'll give you a simple illustration. The railways have recruitment exams all over the country. They had an exam center in Bombay. Raj Thakre's party beat up some Biharis because they said, we will not allow you to come for an exam here. There was a huge outcry. This is about 10 years or 15 years ago. There was an election down the corner and they said, we don't want North Indians. I had gone for a hearing to Delhi. The judge asked me, are you Maharashtrian? I said, yes. He said, we may not be welcome in your state, but you are welcome in ours. So you create a national polarization and divisiveness when you start enforcing this. Instead of that, give an inducement. Tell somebody, come for a Marathi class, I will give you a free meal. Come for a Marathi class, I will give you some benefit, not that I will put somebody else subject to some kind of inconvenience or some kind of disability. That is how you do it. Look at what is the single greatest reason for Hindi becoming prevalent. It is not imposition. It is everybody who wants to go and watch a Hindi film automatically learns Hindi. Today, if you look at a child in Bombay who knows Marathi and the parents are non-Marathi speaking, it is because the maid who deals with the child speaks Marathi. So, you want to improve your language proliferation, do it sensibly. Please don't do it by this method of imposition. It is unpopular and on the long run, it's not going to work.
I realize it's getting late and everybody wants to go home, so I'm going to be very brief. First of all, I want to thank the committee for inviting us. I also want to compliment all the 4 participants. I think they did a fantastic job. Every time I come to GLC, every time I'm invited to GLC, whether it's a meet or a debate, I always make it a point to come because I'm always floored by what a great job students here are doing, ex-students are doing. It's always a pleasure to hear you guys. That said, I just want to give you a personal anecdote, and it's illustrative. Culture constantly metamorphosizes. It doesn't stay stagnant. What we call culture today will change tomorrow. We see it every day in the way we have our festivals. Look at all our festivals now, whether it's Navaratri or Ganesh festival or any festival. The simplicity of those festivals 20 years ago and what they are today and how they changed. There is now Bollywood music, there is dancing, which was just, these were all simple, very, very homely festivals. They've all evolved. Why do they evolve? Because we live in an evolving world. We're exposed to so much, and all those things that we are exposed to, we slowly assimilate into our cultures. So there will always be an evolutionary process against which we can't push back. We can't push back by compulsion. I said I'd give you a personal anecdote. When I was a child, my parents, my mother particularly said, I don't want him to be spoken to or learn any language other than his mother tongue till he leaves and goes to school. Because I think it's important for him to culturally know his mother tongue. So till I went to school, I couldn't speak any language but my mother tongue. That's how I went. Within 6 or 7 months or 8 months of going to school, I started speaking English, I started speaking Hindi, I started speaking all the other languages and slowly forgot my mother tongue. My parents made every possible effort to try and assimilate that culture into me. But because of the world we live in, because of an evolutionary process, I slowly lost that. These things happen naturally. When my daughter was born, I have a multicultural family. My mother tongue, my wife's mother tongue is Hindi, mine is Gujarati. I insisted that we had help at home who spoke Marathi, and I insisted on only one thing. Everybody in my house will talk to my daughter only in Marathi. She will learn only Marathi, because I believe that living in Maharashtra, for her to learn Marathi was really the most important thing. Instead of my maid teaching her Marathi, my maid started experimenting with her English. And instead of teaching her good Marathi, my daughter was learning bad English from me. So these things are a process of evolution. They happen naturally. How much we assimilate, what we do, we can make all those efforts. Imposing rules would have made no difference to either of these two situations. Where in my own family and my personal level, I saw how things actually progressed and evolved. So that's all I want to really say, because of, I think otherwise Venki said it all, and I think, as I said, it's now getting late and everybody wants to go home. Thank you very much for having us here today.
We now request our moderators to reveal the final vote of the House, the most awaited part of this evening.
Team Blue has 38 votes and Team Red has 106 votes. But let me just say, I don't believe that this is a reflection on your debating skills. I think this is a reflection on how the House views the issue really, and maybe you were at a more difficult end of an issue which was more unpopular with the House. So I think both teams did an excellent job in their debating skills, and so this is the result. I don't think it's a reflection on your debating skills. So congratulations to both teams. Next time we should reverse the order of topics. Team A should argue what B has argued, and B should argue and then average out the scores. That will give you a better. Thank you. Thank you very much.
A very big congratulations to Team Opposition. We would now like to invite the moderators to kindly felicitate the winning team. kindly receive the prize. Thank you. Finally, we would like to call upon on stage our chief student editors, Ms. Arya Shringe and Ms. Isha Kulkarni, to present a token of appreciation to our esteemed moderators and conclude this evening with a vote of thanks. Hi. As we come to the end of Knockout 2025, we on the behalf of the Magazine Committee of Government Law College would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all those without whom this event would have not been possible. First and foremost, our sincere thanks to Senior Advocate Mr. Venkatesh, Dhond, and Senior Advocate Mr. Mustafa Doctor, who despite their demanding schedules, graciously accepted our invitations and exalted the event with their presence.
Knockout has always been defined by our talented speakers, and today was no exception. We would like to thank each one of our four speakers, Isha, Ram, Mallika and Luy, for taking the time out to be here today and gracing our event with engaging and thought-provoking arguments. We also thank the two dedicated researchers, Abha and Janvi, for supporting the respective teams behind the scenes. A heartfelt thank you to our beloved principal, Dr. Asmita Vaidya, whose constant support and guidance was crucial to the success of Knockout.
We also want to thank our lovely core members. All of them are standing here, who really were the backbone of Knockout, and I guess that's joining recently. But thank you for making us, make Knockout into a reality.
And finally, thank you to our wonderful audience for bringing your energy, curiosity, and warmth to Knockout. And
we kindly request everyone to stand up for the state anthem and the national anthem.
Next to the entrance and exit. If you would kindly leave your thoughts about the event, we would be much grateful. Thank you.
Hello. Please, before going, we would love and appreciate if all of you all could give us feedback. There's a feedback wall right there. If you all could write something really nice about us, that would be great.
Hello. Junior Co members, please approach the stage. We'd like to take a picture of you with our speakers and the moderators.
Wait. अरे नको रे करू यार. एक्सप्रेशन तुझ्या भाषेमध्ये हे कुठून महत्वाचं आहे. अरे तुम्ही व्यक्त केलं बरोबर आहे. किती प्रश्न आहे मोठा प्रश्न होता ग्राउंड तयार केलं होतं ते. ये किसका फोन है मन?
At this point,